Before we get into it, a quick warning. The War of the Worlds. Next Century is the kind of movie that doesn't feel weird in a fun, harmless way. It feels weird in the way a government press conference feels weird when you realize the script was written before the questions were asked. So, in this video, we're doing it the same way the best expose-style breakdowns do it. Fast context, sharp claims, and facts that reframe what you thought you were watching. Here are the first 10 weird facts, each one a single self-contained reveal. Number 1, the film was completed on the edge of Poland's martial law era, and that timing makes its satire feel almost predictive. Piotr Shulkin shot and finished The War of the Worlds. Next Century, right as the country was sliding toward a clampdown on speech in the public sphere, and the movie's core subject is exactly that machinery: television as a weapon, obedience as entertainment, and fear as a scheduled broadcast. Roger Ebert later highlighted the uncanny overlap. The film reads like a report on how a society is trained to accept the unacceptable, and it appeared only weeks before the real-world crackdown. The official premiere took place at the Gdańsk Film Festival in 1981, and then the film largely vanished from normal circulation as the political climate hardened. Multiple accounts note it was shelved and became more available years later, after the worst period had passed. That disappearing act is part of why the movie gained its reputation. It wasn't merely dystopian science fiction, it became a cultural artifact of the moment it describes. Even its sci-fi disguise did not protect it, because the targets were plain: state media, ideological pageantry, and emergency as performance. Some sources describe it as shelved until the mid-1980s, turning it into a whispered title. Watching it now, the weirdness is not just the Martians, it's the sensation that the film is speaking from inside the broadcast system it condemns, with the program live and the audience trained to applaud. Number 2. The opening dedication is a clue that the movie is less about aliens than about media psychology. Shulkin dedicates the film to both H.G. Wells and Orson Welles, yoking together the original novel and the famous 1938 radio adaptation that blurred fiction and emergency reporting. That pairing matters because Next Century is structured like a study of mass persuasion: announcements, experts, talking heads, and carefully framed facts that tell viewers what to fear and what to accept. In other words, the film treats the Martian invasion the way the radio broadcast treated it, as a transmission event. The weird part is how the dedication reframes everything you see afterward. It's not saying, remember the classic story. It's saying, remember how the story was delivered and how delivery can become reality. Once you notice that, scenes that look like standard dystopia start reading like deliberate recreations of broadcast grammar, the authoritative voice, the rehearsal of panic, and the way dissent is made to look childish or dangerous. Reviewers note that the protagonist, a television presenter, is trapped inside that apparatus, forced to perform belief while hunting truth. The dedication also doubles as a sly challenge to censorship. By anchoring itself to a famous sci-fi property, the film can claim it is only adapting literature, even as it builds a pointed allegory for contemporary power. That protective mask did not always work, but the dedication shows how intentionally the project was engineered from its first seconds. Number 3, the movie is built like a corrupted broadcast schedule, and its main character is literally a face of the system. Iron Idam is not a soldier or scientist. He is a television presenter, the intermediary who tells the public what reality is supposed to look like. That choice lets Shulkin smuggle in a second film inside the first. You constantly slip between story scenes and the language of state TV, announcements, stage public reactions, and media rituals that feel uncomfortably familiar. Several synopses note that Iron's life becomes a performance as the Martians arrive and the authorities demand compliance, but the weirder detail is how the format itself becomes the invasion. The Martians do not need to conquer with spectacular battles. They can conquer by occupying the screen, rewriting the script of daily life, and turning private doubt into a public crime. Even when the camera follows Iron off air, you can feel broadcast pressure in the way people talk, the way crowds assemble, and the way every spontaneous moment seems prearranged. Critics call it a propaganda satire, but its formal trick is sharper. It trains you to notice how easily you accept a talking head as an authority figure. In a conventional Wells adaptation, the invasion is the subject. Here, the medium is the subject, and the invasion merely reveals who controls the microphone. That's why it still hits. It isn't predicting futuristic tech. It's dissecting the old, durable technology of attention and compliance in plain sight. Number 4. Sulkin's Martians are weird. Precisely because they refuse to look like Martians. Instead of tripods and ray guns, the invaders arrive as smooth bureaucratic figures, clean suits, polite cruelty, and a management style that treats a planet like an acquisition. Reviewers repeatedly stress this choice because it flips the Wells template on its head. The horror is not physical annihilation, but administrative capture. The Martians don't just occupy streets, they occupy institutions, headlines, and the vocabulary people are allowed to use. That is why the film can make you laugh, and then immediately feel sick. One moment you are watching an alien official explain procedures. The next you realize you have met this voice before in real life, wearing a different badge. Ebert described the approach as a satire, where the invaders behave like functionaries, and the protagonist is forced to become their media partner. Even the idea of collaboration is reframed as a career move. You can keep your job, your status, and your access, as long as you help sell the new order to everyone else. Here's the strangest layer. Because the Martians act like corporate state managers, the film lands as a double exposure of two systems at once: late 20th century consumer branding and late 20th century political control. That blend is why fans still call it one of the bleakest sci-fi comedies ever made. It's funny the way a bad meeting is funny, right up until you realize the meeting never ends and the minutes are written. Number 5, despite its title, Next Century is really chapter 1 of a much larger, unusually coherent nightmare. Scholars and retrospectives often group it into Piotr Szulkin's Apocalypse cycle, a run of Polish science fiction films that use future settings to diagnose the present, each one nastier and more claustrophobic than the last. In that context, The War of the Worlds. Next Century is the gateway drug. It introduces Szulkin's signature method of mixing bleak absurdism with documentary-like social observation, then using genre to say things ordinary drama could not. The weird part is that, unlike many directors who dabble in dystopia once and move on, Szulkin treated dystopia as a sustained research program. He keeps returning to the same pressure points: mass communication, public obedience, and the way progress can be marketed while life gets smaller. That continuity means the film carries extra internal references: the sterile institutions, the staged crowds, and the sense that the future is not a new world, but a slightly remodeled cage. Viewers who only see Next Century sometimes assume its bleak humor is a one-off stylistic quirk, but in the larger cycle, it reads as the opening move in a deliberate escalation. And because these films were made under censorship, the cycle also works like a survival tactic. Each entry wraps a sharper critique in thicker genre camouflage. So one weird fact is simply this: you're not watching a lone cult oddity. You're watching the first piece of a quietly planned, serialized warning. Number 6. One of the film's most distinctive special effects is simply how it photographs ordinary reality. Rather than inventing a shiny future, Szulkin leans into a drained industrial look that makes the present feel like a post-future. Streets, interiors, and offices that already resemble the aftermath of some invisible catastrophe. That effect is amplified by the cinematography, credited to Zygmunt Samosiuk, a respected Polish director of photography who shot widely across genres. Instead of chasing science fiction spectacle, the camera favors harsh angles, flat institutional lighting, and compositions that feel like surveillance or studio blocking. The weird result is that the film can look both theatrical and documentary at the same time. Crowds arranged like propaganda tableau, then a cut to a cramped corridor that looks stolen from real life. Even when nothing alien is on screen, the image keeps telling you that the world is already occupied. This is why viewers often remember the film as visually oppressive, even if they can't recall a single conventional effects shot. In a decade when many sci-fi films try to impress you with machines, Zulkin tries to unsettle you with architecture, texture, and the emotional temperature of bureaucracy. Ebert called the movie a satire, but the photography is doing something more surgical. It refuses to let the audience escape into fantasy. It says, look closely, this is not outer space, this is home, rearranged. The low budget becomes an advantage here, because socialist modernist spaces double as sets without irony, at all. Number 7. The soundtrack is a stealth character, and it comes from an unexpected corner of Polish music culture. Instead of orchestral space music, the film leans on cold electronic textures and uneasily catchy motifs that feel closer to a malfunctioning broadcasts than a traditional score. Music credits and later discographies connect the project to Józef Skrzek, a major figure in Polish progressive rock and electronic experimentation, whose work often blended synthesizers with anxious spiritual undertones. That background matters because the film's world is all about signals. What the screen tells you, what the loudspeaker orders, what the crowd chants back, and the score sits right on that boundary between art and transmission. At times it feels like music. At other times, it feels like an alarm system that learned to sing. The weird effect is that you can't always tell where the score ends and the regime's audio branding begins, which is exactly the point. Propaganda is most powerful when it becomes ambiance. Even small sonic choices, like jingle-like cues and repetitive pulses, mimic the rhythm of scheduled programming, drilling predictability into the viewer's body. So, while many films use music to help you escape into the story, Next Century uses sound to trap you inside a public address system. If you ever wondered why the movie can feel tense even in scenes where characters are simply sitting and talking, part of the answer is that the soundtrack is insisting that something is always about to be announced. Number 8. The movie's emotional power depends on a casting choice that seems almost perverse for science fiction. Shulkin anchors the entire invasion in the face of a television host. Roman Wilhelmi plays Iron Edom with a controlled, weary precision that makes the character feel like a man who has been rehearsing public sincerity for years. That matters because the plot keeps demanding that Iron perform the correct feelings on cue. Outrage, patriotism, gratitude, fear, optimism, then fear again. With a more conventional heroic actor, the film could drift into melodrama. Wilhelmi's version is stranger. He looks competent, articulate, and socially valuable. Yet he's internally hollowed out by the knowledge that his job is to launder reality. Cast listings alongside Krystyna Janda and Jerzy Stur underline that this isn't a novelty B-movie ensemble. Zulkin recruited serious Polish performers who were associated with mainstream stage and film work. That decision is a hidden special effect. It forces the satire to play at full emotional volume, because the actors treat the absurdity as normal life. Ebert's write-up focuses on Iron as a TV personality caught in a system of manipulation, and Wilhelmi's performance is the reason that idea lands. Even when the film veers into grotesque comedy, he keeps the same exhausted realism, like someone reading propaganda off a teleprompter while privately begging the camera to stop. In a story about invasion, he becomes the occupied territory. Even his name, Iron Item, sounds like a brand label, hard, interchangeable, and repeatable. Number 9, the title tricks a lot of viewers into expecting a familiar Hollywood sequel. But the film is a Polish dystopia that weaponizes the recognition. On posters and streaming listings, you'll often see slight variations. The War of the Worlds, Next Century versus the War of the Worlds, the Next Century, yet both are translations of the Polish Wojna Światów, Następne stulecie. That wording shift sounds trivial, but it changes the implied promise. Next Century feels like a report from a future timeline, while the Next Century sounds like an official historical era, as if the invasion is simply the next phase of administration. Shulkin exploits that ambiguity. He borrows the cultural authority of Wells's title, then delivers something more like political grotesque theater, where the invaders are less a species than a management style. Even Roger Ebert's review had to clarify that this is not your standard alien attack picture. It's a satire about a TV presenter and a society trained to obey messages. For audiences encountering it out of context, the title can feel like bait and switch. until you realize the bait is part of the argument. The film is showing you how easily a familiar label can frame expectations and how quickly people surrender judgment once a brand name is attached. In other words, the title is not a marketing accident. It's an early demonstration of the movie's thesis. If you control the headline, you can control what the crowd believes is about to happen. Number 10. The film's most alien element is how openly it attacks its own environment while still presenting itself as an adaptation. Under communist censorship, direct criticism could end careers, so Sulkin builds his critique as a genre mechanism. Aliens arrive, officials coordinate, television narrates, and the population is instructed how to feel. But underneath that sci-fi scaffolding, the targets are unmistakably local: bureaucratic doublespeak, staged public enthusiasm, and the casual brutality of institutions that claim to be protecting everyone. Film historians describe Next Century as an anti-totalitarian satire, and accounts of its reception emphasize that authorities recognized the mirror and responded by suppressing it. What makes this weird is the care of the disguise. Because it invokes Wells, the film can be defended as literary science fiction. Because it uses comedy, it can be defended as exaggeration. Yet the scenes are staged with such recognizable social detail, the cues, the official language, the public rituals, that it becomes hard to deny what is being described. That is the double move Sulkin pulls. He gives censors a plausible explanation, while giving audiences a clear translation key. This is also why the film still travels outside Poland. Even if you miss specific references, you can feel the universal structure, a system that can survive any change in leadership as long as it controls the screen, the slogans, and the definition of normal. An alien invasion becomes a metaphor for a takeover that never needs to announce itself to the public. Number 11. The hero's name sounds like a slogan, and that's the point. Iron Edom isn't a soldier or a scientist. He's a television presenter, a man trained to smile into the lens while the country claps on cue. The film turns the studio into a battlefield. The desk is a trench, the camera is a rifle, the teleprompter is the chain of command. When the so-called Martians arrive, the invasion doesn't begin with tripods or flaming skylines. It begins with airtime. Iron is ordered to translate fear into entertainment, panic into a special program, and obedience into applause. The weirdest detail is how the movie shows power working through tone. If Iron speaks calmly, the nation stays calm. If he laughs, the audience laughs. If he condemns someone, strangers become targets overnight. By the time you realize it, the alien threat is almost secondary. The real monster is the broadcast itself, because it can make a lie feel like a bedtime story, and a crime feel like a national holiday. That's why the character reads less like a hero and more like a human remote control in public. So number 12. This is the rare alien invasion story, where the most frightening weapon is a donation schedule. In Sulkin's future, citizens are pressured into giving blood as a routine civic obligation, presented like patriotism and enforced like policy. It's bureaucratic horror, a line, a needle, a stamp, and a friendly voice telling you you're helping everyone. The weird twist is that the film makes blood feel like currency. You don't simply donate this, you prove you belong, refuse, and you aren't just selfish, you become suspicious. Comply and you're clean, measurable, useful. That idea lands harder than any spaceship because it is intimate and mundane at the same time. Nobody needs to kick down your door if they can normalize extraction and call it unity. Watch closely and you'll see the satire tightening. Once the system can take something from inside your body with your smile, it can take your opinions, your relationships, even your sense of reality. The Martians barely need to conquer anyone. They simply manage the paperwork and let society do the policing for them. Iron sells it nightly, smiling, until the audience mistakes sacrifice for safety. It turns generosity into surveillance, and the audience applauds the needle anyway. Number 13. The movie's real-world release history reads like an extension of its plot. It was produced in Poland in the early 80s. Right in a period when politics could decide whether a story existed at all. As a result, you don't get a clean, simple, opened nationwide on Friday narrative. Some film listings note a festival showing as early as October 1981, while other sources emphasize that domestic theatrical release came later, and that the picture effectively sat in limbo during a tense political moment. Either way, the weird fact is that the film about information control was itself trapped inside information control. That delay matters because it changes how the movie hits. It isn't predicting a future from a safe distance. It's speaking in code from inside a system that could punish the wrong metaphor. So, when you watch characters comply, applaud, and self-censor, you're not only watching science fiction, you're watching a film that had to navigate the same pressures just to reach an audience at all. That's why later screenings feel like rediscovered contraband, a broadcast pulled from the vault and allowed to breathe. It's ironic. The film warns about controlled messaging, and its own message traveled under supervision too for years. Number 14. Next Century sounds like a sequel hook, but it's really a warning label, and it sits inside a bigger nightmare. Sulkin didn't make this as a lone oddity. Retrospectives often group it with his other dystopian science fiction films from the same era, stories that share a taste for satire, bleak humor, and institutional cruelty. That context becomes a weird fact in itself. You can watch this movie as episode 1 of a long anxiety attack about modern life. Instead of building a single neat allegory, Sulkin keeps circling the same obsession: systems that rewrite humans into obedient tools, then blame them for being tools. Seen that way, Iron Idem isn't just one character. He's a prototype that echoes across the director's later worlds. The citizen who wants comfort, bargains for approval, and wakes up living inside someone else's script. It also explains the film's tone. It isn't trying to charm you. It's trying to inoculate you, forcing you to recognize propaganda, even when it wears a friendly smile. If you expected a pulpy invasion, that's the trap. The real continuity is the creeping loss of inner freedom today. Once you notice that pattern, small details become clues, and the satire feels less clever and more brutally accurate now. Number 15. For a film obsessed with television, the lead casting is almost cruelly perfect. Roman Wilhelmi was a major Polish actor, and he brings a kind of practiced authority that makes Iron Idem instantly believable as a public figure. The weird fact is how the movie weaponizes that credibility. Iron doesn't need a uniform to command attention. He has posture, voice, timing, everything you associate with trust. So when he repeats official lines, the words land with the weight of fact, even when you know they're poison. That creates a uniquely uncomfortable viewing experience, because the film doesn't portray propaganda as cartoon villainy. It shows it delivered by a professional who knows how to connect with ordinary people, how to sound sympathetic, how to turn outrage into a neat segment that ends on schedule. Watch his eyes in the studio scenes. You can see the performer balancing two realities: the character's desire to survive and the growing awareness that survival might require becoming the mouthpiece of his own erasure. That tension is the engine of the film's dread. It's a masterclass in charm used as a cage, nightly too. The performance makes you complicit because you keep listening to him. Number 16. One of the film's nastiest jokes is that it turns mass democracy into a TV game. Instead of secret tribunals, you get public plebiscites, mediated through broadcasting, where the crowd is invited to participate in judgment, as if it were entertainment. It's weird because it looks almost silly on the surface. Phone-in choices, public verdicts, a nation reacting in real time. But the mechanism is brutal. Once people can be guided to vote on someone's humanity, the state doesn't need to do the dirty work alone. Citizens become co-authors of the repression, and the guilt gets distributed so thin that nobody feels responsible. The film understands that the easiest way to launder cruelty is to wrap it in ceremony and call it public will. That's why the crowd scenes feel colder than any monster. They aren't raging. They're participating, politely, like they're following the rules of a show. And because Iron Idem is the host, he becomes the bridge between violence and normal life, translating fear into a simple option. Vote, approve, move on. It's modern, it's familiar, and it's terrifying. Even silence becomes a choice, on camera, and it still feels uncomfortably plausible today. Number 17. The title sets a trap. You hear War of the Worlds and you picture H.G. Wells. Victorian panic, artillery, strange cylinders, a classic survival story. Then the movie swerves. This is not a faithful adaptation. It uses the phrase as a signal, then builds a totally different conflict. There's no comforting sense that science will save the day. The war here is fought over perception. Control the broadcast, and you control the event. Control the event, and you control the population. That's why the film's weirdest moments feel quiet. A studio announcement that redefines reality. A bureaucratic rule that turns citizens into resources. A cheerful segment that trains people to accept humiliation as normal. In this version, the invaders don't need to destroy cities. They need to edit language until people can't describe what's happening to them. And because Iron Item is part of that machine, the story becomes a nightmare about complicity. You don't just fear the Martians, you fear the ease with which a society can be persuaded to welcome them. It's Wells by way of a newsroom where the headline kills, not fire. That's the punchline. The conqueror wins by teaching you new words to obey. Number 18. The soundtrack has a weird second life outside the film. Like a signal leaking from the broadcast. Józef Skrzek, a key figure in Polish progressive and electronic music, composed material tied to the movie, and it didn't stay buried in the mix. In the early 80s, music credited directly to the film was issued as its own release, which is unusual for a dystopian satire that wasn't built as a commercial franchise. Listen to that music and you can hear why it fits. Pulses that feel like machinery, tones that hover like clinical lighting, melodies that never resolve, as if the track itself is waiting for permission to end. The weird fact is that the album format changes how you read the movie. Instead of background score, it becomes a parallel narrative, another layer of the same world, but without dialogue, without slogans, just the emotional aftertaste. And for fans who discover the music first, the film can feel like an illustration of the soundtrack, rather than the other way around. It's a rare case where the audio artifact becomes its own entry point into the story's anxiety. Number 19. The movie looks like cheap science fiction at a glance, but it's photographed with the seriousness of a political drama. That contrast is the weird fact. Instead of shiny futurism, you get harsh light, institutional interiors, and faces framed like evidence. The cinematography leans into texture and fatigue, empty corridors that swallow people, close-ups that feel interrogational, and studio lighting that turns everyone into a product. Because the visuals are grounded, the absurd elements hit harder. A TV host can be treated like a national oracle. A slogan can replace a thought. A public smile can function like a confession. And when the film does push into stylization, bright broadcasts, staged ceremonies, the shift feels less like spectacle and more like contamination, as if the propaganda is infecting the image itself. That visual strategy also supports the story's central fear, that reality is not destroyed in one explosion. It is slowly relit, reframed, and re-edited until citizens no longer recognize the difference. By the end, the camera has become part of the occupation, and you can feel it watching you back. Every shot feels like a memo with teeth. You can feel the lens judging everyone, constantly. Number 20. The strangest proof of the film's power is how often it gets rediscovered by programmers decades later. This isn't a cozy cult classic that people quote at parties. It's abrasive, politically charged, and allergic to simple catharsis. And yet, it keeps resurfacing in curated series and retrospectives devoted to dystopian cinema, treated as a key artifact rather than a footnote. That ongoing circulation is a weird fact, because it suggests the movie ages in reverse. The farther you get from its original moment, the more modern it can feel, especially in an era where public life is mediated through screens, and outrage is packaged as content. Curators also frame it as part of a distinct Eastern European tradition of science fiction, less interested in gadgets, more interested in control systems. So, audiences who come expecting aliens leave talking about media, ethics, civic rituals, and the price of belonging. In other words, the film still does the same thing it did in the early 80s. It hijacks your expectations, then forces you to examine your own relationship with the broadcast. That's why it returns, like a warning rerun, It doesn't age out, it sharpens with repetition. Bonus fact, the film's most unsettling trick is that it plays as science fiction from a distance and as confession up close. Read the premise and you get Martians, invasion, future. Watch it, and the real subject feels closer. Media as state religion, public rituals replacing private thought, and a society trained to accept humiliation as participation. That's why critics keep describing it with the same mix of admiration and alarm. It's satire, but it's also diagnosis. The jokes aren't there to relax you, they're there to show how easily fear can be monetized and how quickly the crowd can be coached to celebrate its own extraction. Even the title, Next Century, lands like a dare. You are invited to laugh, then realize you are laughing at a mechanism that still exists. And when Iron Item tries to keep his job, his status, his normal life, the film refuses to let you treat him as a victim. It asks the harder question, how much of your identity is real and how much is a performance you do because the camera is on. If you want one takeaway, it's this. The invasion succeeds the moment the audience calls it, oh, necessary.